Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. I'd like to be. Oh, okay. We're good? Yep. I'd like to begin by acknowledging we are in Treaty 1 territory in the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. All individuals entering city-operated facilities, including City Hall, are required to wear non-medical face masks. Those at the table are not required to wear masks while sitting as long as there's a distance 6 feet from anyone else. Once you leave your seat at the table, you must put your mask back on. As directed by Manitoba Health, we're requesting people to avoid close contact within 2 meters with anyone showing symptoms of a respiratory illness, such as coughing or sneezing. If you are experiencing flu-like symptoms, we are requesting that you excuse yourself from the room. I'd like to introduce the members of the panel. I'm Linda McFadden. I'll be chairing this morning. To my left is Mark Boreski, and to my far left, Gisela Rempel. The secretary today is, I've forgotten your name. Thank you. Cara Belshaw, yes. And the city will be represented by Jason Brown. We'll be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. Use of cell phones is not permitted except by approval of the chair, and could you make sure that they're all turned to silent, please? Okay.
State your name. Do you affirm the evidence you present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name. Do you affirm the evidence you present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
The first item today is 615 Jarvis, is that correct?
I don't have them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. You can use the sorry, you can get printed materials.
Thank you, Jason. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Subject property is located at 615 Jarvis Avenue, 14002350500. Current assessment for 2021 roll year is $574,000. The department would like to make a recommendation for this property at $551,000.
And are you aware of this recommendation?
Yes, I am, and I accept.
And you accept? Okay, thank you. Could you just repeat that amount for me, please?
$551,000.
51,000.
Just have question of the assessor, if you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
Mr. Brown, can you advise me how you came up with that 551, what parameters you used?
Just adjustment of cap rate.
So what did you increase the cap rate to? Because currently it is at what, 7-ish, I think? 7?
7.2 to 7.5.
7.5. I see. Okay. Thank you, Carly.
Panel members, do you have any questions? The second item is number 10 Robinson.
Subject property is located at 10 Robinson Street, 14001432000. Defending a 2021 assessed value of $631,000. I will note that 2018 assessment was at $629,000, so this is an increase of 0.3%. 2018 was not appealed. This is a warehouse building consisting of 4 stories, built in 1907, 10-foot wall height, the leasable area of 36,630. On page 3, I have some comparable rents. So I tried to pick some of the same vintage properties as the subject. So we can see the effective year built ranging from 1911 up to 1953, with the majority of them being under 1930. All located relatively in a similar area, but some of them are located a bit further away from the subject. We can see the net rents that are being paid at the comparables range from $2.39 up to $6.82, with the majority being in the $3 range. On page 4 of my evidence, I have my income workup. We're assessing 36,630 square feet. We're using a rent of $2.48 a square foot. We've applied a vacancy of 12% for this property. Expenses at 2% and shortfall at $3.75 per square foot. This generates a net operating income of $61,858,000. We've capitalized that at 9.8%, which is the highest cap rate for industrial properties in the city of Winnipeg for our department. And that is illustrated on page 6. If we go to page 6, it's the second set of rows down from the top, industrial properties. City of Winnipeg's using a range from 5.5 to 9.8. Once again, we're using 9.8 for the subject property today. So the highest cap rate that the department uses for industrial properties. Some photographs starting on page 10. So this is located on Robinson off Sutherland, near Main Street. Aerial photograph below that, and some street view photographs on the following page. There's a plan on page 12 showing, I believe that's the main floor. And then we have the income and expense statements that were provided by the owner. This is owner occupied, despite the fact that they did not indicate that. I'm assuming that rent is a book rent. But they are showing it at $74,000, and the NOI at $61,000, which is almost the same as the income workup I showed you on page 4. So having said that, we ask that the assessed value of $631,000 be made.
Do you have questions?
I have no questions.
Do you have no questions? Mark, do you have questions?
Well, I have a comment. Thank you very much for the excellent information. I don't always see a bunch of photos, a nice plan. This is very helpful. Thank you. But I got no questions.
Gisela, do you have any questions?
Yes, I'm just wondering, could you remind me what the 2018 assessment was?
I can. The 2018 assessment was 629,000, which represents a 0.32% increase.
Thank you. That's all my questions.
And I have no questions. Would you like to go ahead?
Yes, well, first of all, I'd like to refer to my brief. And first of all, I'd like to indicate that there's an error on my brief with respect to the cap rate. I used the cap rate of 10%. It should be 9.8%. Using a cap rate of 9.8%, the value that I arrive at using the other parameters on my brief, the value I arrive at is $590,000. So, in short, I have no argument with respect to the rent. I have no argument with respect to the capitalization rate. The only issue that I have is with respect to the 5% cost. I'd like to add those back into the calculation of the assessed value. And these arguments have been made many times over the last many months. And again, so based on my brief, my presentation using a cap rate of 9.8%, I arrive at a value of $590,000, and I request that the board consider that. Thank you.
Now, do you have questions?
I have no questions.
I have no questions.
No questions. Thank you.
And I have no questions. Thank you. Yes, I have to bring it up as well. Our next item is 1127 Stanford. Is everyone ready? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will note that we have a non-cooperation for this property. Would you like me to start with that?
Yes, please.
Thank you. So we can turn right to page 2 of my evidence. At the very top, requests for income information. We can see there that we did not receive a 2016 or 2017 INE. And below that, I did some digging into this. We have not received an INE from this property going back to 2007. So we can see it's sold twice since then. So neither the current owner or the previous owner has not submitted information. From there, we can go to page 14. On page 14, we have the registered mail envelope. I'll note at the top right-hand side of that envelope, there is a tracking number. It is LP 578-652-119CA. Below the envelope, we have the signature for the certified mail. Once again, at the top of that portion, we can see that same tracking number ending in 119CA. This was signed by Sindhu Karmjit, which is the same name on the application. And following that, on page 15, we have the blank income and expense mailer. Once again, I'll just point out the top left-hand side of the cover letter of that income and expense mailer has that same tracking number ending in 119CA. So this was sent as a package. It was signed for, and it was not returned. And based on that, we're asking for the penalties for non-compliance being granted. Thank you.
And are you contesting that?
No, I'm not.
Great. Panel members, will you go ahead then? Okay. Go ahead first, please.
Thank you. So to refer to my brief, so the effective age of this particular building is it was built in 1962, so it's almost 60 years old, this particular building. It's a very old, in my opinion, very old building. If you refer to page 2 of my presentation, we use a rate of $7.01 per square foot, which is the same rate that the assessor uses, and we're not contesting that particular issue. We're not contesting the vacancy allowance of 4%. The two issues that we are contesting are, of course, the reinstatement of the fee of 5%. And we're asking for an increase in the cap rate from 7% to 7.5%, mainly for two reasons. The age of the building and the land to building ratio. It's only 1.85. It's very, very small piece of land that this particular property, this building is sitting on. Now, we had, several months ago, we had appealed the property right across the street at 1166 Sanford, and the board at that time, based on a similar argument that we had with respect to age, even though the building across the street is about is almost 10 years newer than the subject property, the board at that time decided to provide a 7.5% cap rate, and of course, and it reinstalled the 5% non-recoverable expenses. So based on that, we'd like the assessed value to be reduced to $1,370,000. I also added some pictures. Fortunately, my color toner expired when I was printing these pictures out, and so you'll have to look at the black and white photos, unfortunately. And so the first page, of course, shows the front of the building, and the property that I was referring to at 1166 Sanford is almost across the street. The second picture is the rear of the subject property, and also page 3 shows that it's located not far from rail tracks. These tracks, there is no spur line to the subject property, so these tracks just bypass the subject property. And that is my evidence. Thank you.
Mark, do you have a question?
What goes on in this building?
Well, it's a strip mall. There are various businesses there. Some auto-related businesses, some retail businesses. If you take a look at one of the pictures showing the front face of the building, you'll see in the center, you see there's a collision establishment. So there's some auto-related, some retail.
So the city has this classified as a warehouse. Is any of it actually used as warehouse?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Much of it is used. I drove around the back. Some of those doors were open, and much of the space is used as warehouse. Yes.
What sort of ratio between office and warehousing?
I'm sorry, I can tell you, but it's the warehouse proportions were a pretty significant part. I can't tell you the proportion of it.
What about the longevity of the tenancies? Has it been long-term tenants in here?
Well, most of the tenants are long-term. Yes, I will be advising the owner to obviously to begin providing I&E. I didn't dwell too much on the type of tenants, because we were using market rents, and the rent that he is receiving on the subject property may not necessarily have been market rents, and we've been using market rents.
With respect to cap rate, you wanted up to 7.5 from 7.
From 7, yes. And
yeah.
yes.
What cap rate evidence do you have?
Well, again, I didn't provide any evidence, any cap rate evidence, but the evidence that, when, let's just say, for example, when you refer to the assessor's evidence, and I mean, this cap rate evidence that the assessor, sorry, he doesn't provide it in this brief, but in previous briefs, he indicated that the highest cap rate that the city provides is 9.8%. This is for, and that to a great extent depends on the age of the building. And in this particular instance, we feel that 7.5% is an adequate cap rate based on that, particular age of this building, and based on the fact that the building across the street that was appealed, the board decided to give it a 7.5%, even though it was 10 years newer, and also the land to building ratio, in our opinion, for this type of operation is not the best.
The pictures show the obvious age of this building, but what sort of condition is it in?
Well, I mean, it shows, the conditions of this building is reflective of the age of the building. I mean, I didn't see any obvious issues like, structural problems. When one looks at the building, and I went around the building a couple of times at least, and I was in one of the premises. It looks like a fairly old building, but as I said, I had not seen any obvious foundation issues.
Lastly, where is Sanford?
Sanford is just one street east of Empress, and this is off Sargent. If you know where Garbage Hill is, it's near that area.
Does this building attract airport-related businesses?
I didn't see any airport-related businesses in this building. I didn't see any airport-related businesses in other buildings on this street. Although I'm not sure what an airport-related business is. As far as I know, I didn't see anything like that. Okay. The building, for example, across the street that I'm referencing is. It was not an airport-related business. It was owner-occupied business.
That's all my questions.
No, my questions have been answered. Thank you.
Madam Chair, do you mind if I ask a question?
Sure, go right ahead.
You didn't provide any income and expense statements in your evidence. Did you have any contact with the owner previous to this appeal?
I had contact. I was not aware that that information was not provided to the city until I was provided the brief. But as I said, I will be talking to the owner to make sure that in the future he does provide the city. Yes,
that's my question. Thank you.
I have no further questions. Any summation from anyone?
I still need.
Oh, sorry.
No worries.
I lost my place. You do get a turn.
Thank you. So Mr. Sikowski's been over most of the attributes. This is we're classifying it as a warehouse business or a property with 8 premises, built in 1962 with 15-foot wall height and a leasable area of 16,835. Lots of rental comps, but we can skip that, seeing as how Mr. Sikowski is agreeing with the rent. Page 4 is my income workup. So using the same rent as Mr. Sikowski, 4% vacancy, 2% expenses, 3.75 per square foot shortfall, and we're capitalizing at 7%. You can see at the top of my income workup, we are classifying this as a flex warehouse, which means that it can include some office space and some retail, which is where the 7%, typically a flex warehouse gets slightly lower cap rates than a storage warehouse. Page 6 is my cap rate information. So once again, going to the second set of rows down from the top, we can see the city of Winnipeg for the 20th percentile, we're showing 6.34%. And for the 80th percentile, we're showing 7.8%. This property obviously falls almost directly in the middle of that. So it'd be almost 50th percentile. There are some photographs starting on page 10. So once again, showing the location between Sargent and Wellington, just east of Empress. Aerial shot below that. And a couple street shots on page 12. There is a plan on page 13 showing the units and the sizes. And based on that, we're asking that the assessment be confirmed at $1,549,000. I will note that 2018 was set at $1,457,000. That's an increase of 6.3%, and that was not. Thank you.
Mr. Sidkowski, do you have questions?
Sorry, oh, I didn't quite hear that. Oh,
Do you have
were
questions?
addressing it? Thank you. Oh, thank you. So, Mr. Smith, cap rates, quite often, the imposition of a particular cap rate reflects the age of the building quite often. Is that correct?
It reflects many variables: location, age, quality, wall height, size.
So, in your opinion, this building being built in 1962, what is the quality of this building?
It appears average for its age.
Have you inspected it?
I did drive by it.
You haven't been inside though, I don't
I have not.
Okay, so you wouldn't know what the conditions are inside? No, okay, okay. Right, I note that for the property on Jarvis, 615 Jarvis, which is similar in age, you used a 7.5% cap rate.
This is a superior location.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
He was comparing this to the recommendation I made on Jarvis, where I moved it to 6.5, and I would say this is a superior location. Proximity to the airport, proximity to other industrial buildings.
How close is it to the airport? I mean, it's, in my opinion, it's pretty far from the airport. I mean, obviously Jarvis is further from the airport, but
If you look on page 10 of my brief, map view, you can see Century and King Edward there. On the left-hand side, the two vertical yellow lines. The airport's just beyond that.
so you said you drove by this airport, drove by this property. Had you seen any airport or airline related businesses in this property or in properties nearby?
Just because they're not directly related to the airport doesn't mean there isn't some spin-off. The area is just a superior location of Jarvis, and I don't think that's in dispute.
What is the age of Jarvis?
Jarvis was significantly newer, but it looked to be in worse condition. Jarvis was, I mean, we don't compare assessments anyway.
No, I know, but we're trying to determine what would be the.
Yeah, but we don't compare assessments.
But we're trying to determine whether the cap rate is appropriate for this property.
I don't know if you listen to the opening blurb from.
No, I know that. Those are my questions.
I don't have any questions, though I would note that it was nice to see the letter that went along with the envelope.
I do have it with me. It wasn't provided in there, and I believe you guys.
In your evidence. In your evidence,
Oh.
when we were talking about the non-cooperative.
Yes. Okay, no, I thought you meant the
showed the
application.
letter, you related the number to the envelope. We didn't have that last week, and it was of some concern in the case that we were dealing with then. So
Yeah.
it's just nice to see that.
And on my side, it's nice to have it too.
Okay.
I have a question. we have no summation, we'll move on. Nope. Take a minute to call these up here. All right, and our next item is 289 King Street. Ready to go?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Roll number is 13081447000. Address is 289 King Street. I'm defending a 2021 assessed value of $1,176,000. This is an industrial warehouse, 3 stories consisting of 6 premises. Was built in 1904 to 1946. We're using 1930 as an effective age today. Wall heights range from 12 to 13 feet. And the leasable area is just under 98,000 square feet. Okay, Mr. Sikowski is not disputing rent, so I won't go over my comparables. That brings us to page 4. So we can see the leasable area at 97,999. We're using an average of $2.87 per square foot, yielding a gross income of $281,779. We've used 25% vacancy for this property due to the age. That is the highest vacancy that the department uses, and it's only reserved for chronic vacancy. 2% expenses and $3.75 per square foot of shortfall, generating a net operating income of $115,233. Once again, we're using the highest cap rate that the department uses at 9.8%. This generates a value of $1,176,000. Photographs starting on page 10, starting with the map at the top. So this is located just off Main Street, off Logan, right before King. Some street shot views on page 11. There is a wholesale furniture store operating out of this building. You can see some pictures on page 12. There's also a photography studio operating in this property. We can see some pictures starting on page 13. Continuing through to page 14, 15, they have different sections of the property, I guess, decorated for different styles of photo shoots. So you can just see an idea of what interior looks like based off those. There is a rental advertisement on page 13, advertising 15,539 square feet, or between 3,727 up to 15,539. So you can see some of the property highlights located central Winnipeg. Variable space for rent, some on the main floor, some on the 3rd floor. 11 to 11.5 clear ceiling height. There is parking on site. It is fully sprinklered with a sheltered loading dock, and it's zoned M. We can see they're seeking $7 net for the main floor and $3.75 net for the 3rd floor. Income and expense statements on page 19. So our effective gross income on my workup was $211,334. Here they're showing $238,000. And then there is the tenant roster on the back, showing some of the rents that are being paid at the bottom section, the far right-hand side shows the rents, $329, $290. There is one for 32 cents, but it's a small area. I'm not sure what that was for. Most of the rents were signed between 08 and 13, so obviously we're using an 18 reference date. Obviously those are a bit old, but there is a variety of rents in this building. Based on that, we're asking that the assessment be confirmed at $1,176,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any questions?
No, I don't.
Mr. Berkey?
Where is the vacancy in the building, and has it been chronically the same spots in the building that remain vacant?
I couldn't quite figure that out. I'm assuming, I believe I think there's just various spaces open. If you look at the rental ad on page 18, shows some of the spaces they're advertising for rent. The top portion would be the main floor. That's the 3,700 square feet. And then the third floor looks like the most of it is available.
Is there an elevator?
I believe there is.
There is, yes.
That's all my questions.
I have no questions. Thank you.
I have no questions either.
So, Mr. Borowski, maybe just further to that question that you asked, I had been in this building many times, and usually the space that's not occupied is located up in the upper floors. The main floor is, I think most of it is occupied. I know that the cabinet manufacturing company selling their cabinets there, and there's a window. They sell windows and they sell furniture out of the first couple of floors.
Go ahead.
So again, I'd like to turn to my brief, and on page 2 of my brief, I'd like to correct an error, slight error. It shows that I used a 10% cap rate. That should actually be 9.8%. I believe that that's due to rounding on my computer. So in any event, if you use a 9.8% cap rate, the value that I'm asking for is $1,068,000. And we have no arguments with respect to the rent that's used, the vacancy allowance, the shortfall. The only issue that we like this board to consider is reinstalling the non-recoverable expense allowance of 5%. And by doing so and using a cap rate of 9.8%, we are asking for the value to be at $1,068,000. Thank you.
Any questions, Mr. Brown?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So what was your revised value again?
$1,068,000.
Okay. And that's lower than 2018, which was at 1,121,000.
But it was not appealed that in 2018.
Okay, those are my questions.
Ms. Randall? No questions. And I have no questions. Take a break. I think we've got everything up. Everybody's ready to go? All right. Please proceed. I've called the meeting back to order.
For the record, please state your name. Do you affirm the evidence you present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you.
Okay, the property we are looking at is 34 Debates, and we are looking at a 2020 supplemental. Is that correct? Correct? Okay, please proceed.
Thank you. Address 34 Debate Street, roll number 0609-3231100. defending an assessed value of $5,135,000. This is an industrial warehouse consisting of, it's one building built in 4 stages. It is 1 story, built between 1994 and 2020, using an effective age of 1998. Wall heights range from 20 to 22. I'll note that 65% of the building is 20, 35 is 22. Or that was before the addition. I'm not sure the breakdown now, but it looks to be all the same. It is zoned M2, and we're valuing a leasable area of 54,156, which is roughly $10,000 or 10,000 square feet more than the previous appeal because of the addition, which I'll get to. Some rental comparisons. We actually do agree on rent, so we can skip those. We can move right to page 4. Once again, leasable area 54,156. We're using $6 a square foot. Generates effective gross of $324,936. We've reduced that by 2.5% vacancy, 2% expenses, and a shortfall at $3.75 per square foot. This results in a net operating income of $305,400, and we've capitalized that at 6%. There is an additional building value of $45,000, which I will address when we get to the photographs. So the total assessment is $5,135,000 rounded. Once again, we have our capitalization rates on page 6, cap rate evidence on page 7, and the non-recoverable expense sampling on page 8. Turning to page 10, starting with the map at the top, this is located off Dugald in the St. Boniface Industrial Park. Aerial photograph below that. The 2 additional buildings are located at the bottom left-hand corner of that aerial shot. You can see a street view and a 3/4 view on page 11. On page 12, this was the 2014 edition of 517 square meters, or roughly just over, oh no, it's all in square meters. But you can see the declared construction value for that edition in 2014 was just over $500,000. And then we have the page 13 shows the 2014 edition in white. So it was an L-shaped building, and they filled in the vacant space with building. That does include a mezzanine in that portion, which is shown on page 14. This is not a storage mezzanine. It does include a lunchroom, locker rooms, washrooms. So there's plumbing, and the finish is above that of a storage mezzanine. Page 15, this shows the 2019 edition, which we put on for effective January 1st, 2020. This is a 930 square meter edition. There is no declared construction value for this. The plan is on the following page, on page 16. Once again, shown in white, the addition. So they've added onto the rear of the building. 1-story warehouse addition, which is roughly 10,000 square feet. Page 17 at the top shows the tenant information. This is owner occupied, as indicated by the check mark on the very right-hand side of that portion. This was already heard in 2020 before the supplementary. So this was the appellant's income workup for 2020. You can see originally we were at $6.20. For the supplement, we've reduced that to $6, which is the same as the appellant. kept all the other parameters the same, vacancy at 2.5%. So I'm looking at the middle column. Expenses at 2% and shortfall at $3.75 per square foot, and we capitalize that at 6%. So all those parameters are the same for this assessment, with the exception of we've reduced the rent to $6 from $6.20. And on the last page of my brief, page 18, this is the order for that hearing in 2020 before the supplementary, and it was confirmed. So all those parameters, 2.5% vacancy, 2% expenses, 3.75 shortfall, and 6% were all confirmed. As was the $6.20 rent. We've lowered that to $6, kept all the other parameters the same. And based on that, we're asking that the assessment be confirmed at $5,135,000. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you have any questions for the assessor, Mr. Brown? Smith. Smith. Sorry.
It's quite all right.
Brown Smith.
We love some last names. Suit, same shirt,
Same haircut.
Yeah, true.
Fair enough. Yes, I do have a few questions. So, you just mentioned the confirmation of the original appeal of 2020. That's under appeal at the municipal board, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. You had mentioned just earlier in this session increases, and believe me, I'm not comparing assessments here, but you had mentioned increases on a couple of other properties of under 10%. The original 2020 assessment for this property had gone up 35.2% over the 2018 value. That would that not indicate that perhaps it's beyond the normal range of increases in the market?
Those properties were not nearly the quality of this building. This is investment grade, much newer, much superior location.
Granted, superior location, construction,
Superior
etc.
almost everything.
But a 35.2% increase, this is prior to any addition being added on to the roll. Does that not ring some alarm bells that perhaps this is over market value?
Yeah, it is nice to look at the increase over previous cycles. However, it could be argued that the previous cycle was low.
Okay. Thank you for that. The main points of contention here today, I think, are fairly straightforward. As you'd indicated, I gather the city has agreed essentially to our rental rate of $6 a square foot for the property overall.
Using economies of scale, we figured that it was warranted for a 20-cent decrease for the added space.
Okay, so then our discrepancies then are vacancy, expense allowance, and capitalization rate. Okay, so in looking at the vacancy rate applied here, and I'm looking at, I guess, my page, but I'll look at yours to start with. So you've applied a 2.5% vacancy loss. Is that not the lowest end of the range for the city's parameters?
Yes.
And what would point the city to a 2.5% vacancy rate versus others? Is that versus your other vacancy allowances? Is that area related? Are there particular stats that we're looking at there?
Not 100%. I know obviously area would be a factor. All the outside sources are indicating that there is a shortage of industrial property in the city right now. Obviously, usually results in bigger increases from year to year, higher rents, lower cap rates, and more vacancy. But I don't have that study in front of me. So
okay, so there's no particular vacancy stats that we can look at for that.
Not in front of me. Okay.
The next point then, I'm going to save us all time here. The expense allowance, I'm not going to ask this as a question. We've each heard it dozens of times. You're probably each individually well aware of my position on that, and I'm happy to spend the time going through it if you so desire, but I will leave that alone for the time being. We can move down to capitalization rate. So the cap rate that the city has used in the 2020 supplemental assessment here is 6%. Whereas in the prior assessment of 2018, and this is your last page, which is evidence from my prior brief there, the capitalization rate was 7%. So we're looking at a 1% drop in cap rate in the city's parameters for this property over a 2-year time span. Is there any specific evidence to back a 1% drop? That's a rather dramatic drop in capitalization rate when interest rates have been relatively stable over that time period.
Yeah, these are all market derived, model generated. So 86% would be what we're seeing in the market. I will note that if we added in the 5% expenses, it would be even lower to get to those sales. Yeah, that's just what we're seeing in the marketplace.
Okay, and the evidence for that would be or some of the evidence would be on your page number 7, the comps that are presented at the bottom there.
Those aren't meant to be compared to the assessment. They're just showing some of the sales we're seeing. On page 6, though, it shows our range from 5.5 to 9.8. So this is above our lowest cap rate, despite it being a newer building in a good location.
So I'll come back to page 6 in a moment here, but just looking at page 7 again. So forgive me for doing it again, but I've brought this particular one up previously, and there is a correction to be made. 90 Park Lane was not an investment sale as such, in that it was unoccupied. The prior tenant had vacated the property. The REIT that owned the property put the property up for sale on the market, and it sold to an owner occupant. So they were not putting a tenant in either. So there was no existing income stream on which to base a cap rate, nor were they putting in a tenant that they would speculatively develop a capitalization rate from. So the 90 Park Lane is not a transaction that would develop a cap rate. It has none of the ingredients. Our firm was involved in the sale of the property, so I can confirm all of those details. Just switching back to page number 6 then, and the industrial cap. So I'm looking at the city's range, and we have 5.5 at the low end up to 9.8 at the top end, with 20th to 80th percentile being 6.34 to 7.8. However, when we look at the market participants information, if we look at Colliers, they're between 6.5 and 7.25. If we look at CB Richard Ellis, they have 2 ranges, low end of 6 to 6.5. For industrial A, 6.5 to 7.25. Cushman Wakefield, 6.5 up to 7.75 on the high end for the low end of industrial B, this all being investment grade. So the city's cap rate range tends to be significantly under what the main commercial market participants are indicating. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, I mean, they're showing a range between 6 and 7.75, 7.75 for industrial B. CBRE is showing 6% for industrial A. This is a single tenant building, which generally receives lower cap rates than a multi-tenant building. Yeah, it's just what our model has shown using actual sales.
So I'm sorry to belabor the point. So you're saying that a single tenant building would get a lower capitalization rate than a multi-tenant building?
Well, the outside sources are actually showing the same. Colliers is showing the same cap rates for single and multi. It depends. There's variables. Depends on the size of the building and how many tenants.
Okay, well, I'll get into that on my end of the evidence, I guess.
A small single tenant building.
Those are all of my questions. Thank you.
I'm a little confused by the two plans. Let me find them again.
On pages
13, starting on 13.
13 and 17,
Yeah.
16.
So do I take it that there was an addition that squared off the L shape, and then there was another addition that just made the square even bigger?
To the rear of that, correct.
Okay, the first one was done when?
2014 was the permit was pulled December 2014, so we'll call it a 2015.
And we're now prompted, this application is prompted by that larger addition that was done.
Correct. Roughly double the size as the first. The first edition was 517, and this one's 930. So.
Okay. No other questions?
May I ask when the latest edition was completed?
We used an effective date of January 1st, 2020. I can see if the notes. Occupancy permit was taken out December 19, but we used January 1st, 2020 as an effective date.
And that's what the supplementary was based on. Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
I have no further questions. Mr. Smith?
Sorry, I don't know if this is a question. So you've included the board order on page 18 from the original 2020 confirmation?
Correct.
Okay. I'm just having a look at that. Who's the chair? Okay. That's all of my questions. Thank you.
I have a supplemental. Is that the one that's appealed to the municipal board? That order that's included?
It is, yes.
But
This will override that, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Can you please proceed?
Yes, thank you very much. So number 34, debates. As Mr. Brown indicated, this is an owner-occupied building. It's owned by Mellick Plastics. They are a manufacturer of plastic products, components. So it is a manufacturing warehouse, essentially. We can begin perhaps on my page number 3. I think is probably the best place to start. So looking in my chart there, you can see that the original 2020 assessment, which had been appealed, as I noted, we had a 35.2% increase over the 2018 assessment. This is well outside of market norms over a 2-year time span. It's not that the original assessment was significantly undervalued either. If you look at the reduction that was gained in 2018, it's not significant. It went from 3,333,000 down to 3,208,000. So a very marginal reduction overall. So for that original appeal, we're looking at a 35.2% increase in market value. Obviously, that's significantly more now that the new addition is put on, going up from 4,337,000 in the original 2020 assessment up to $5,135,000. So dramatic increase in value in this property, going from original 3.2 million roughly in 2018 up to almost 5.2 million. So getting on towards a $2 million increase, simply not supported by the market evidence as we see it in the market. So let's look at the subject property itself. The stats are shown there for you on page 3. There were 5 different construction timeframes between 94, 2000, 2004, 2015, and 2020. So the business has grown over time and they have added on to it. I would, of course, point out that we are not valuing the business. It doesn't matter how successful the business is, we're valuing the real estate here. So the fact that they added on speaks to how their business is doing, not how the real estate market itself is going. So our total leasable area, including mezzanine space that is leasable, is 54,156. We have a land to plan area ratio of 3.29 to 1. Moving on, page number 4, all of the details are there for you. I will point out that the majority of the building is 20 feet external wall height. There is one section that's 22 feet external wall height. That was the original building component. The rest of the details are there for you, but we can also see those in the photos. So let's flip through those relatively quickly. Beginning on page 5, you can see the exteriors, you can see the loading area, shot of office space in the mezzanine. And you get into the warehousing area on the bottom of page 6 for their products to be shipped, and top of page 7, and then the main manufacturing floor area on the bottom of page 7 and on into page 8. So you can see the machinery that's in use, etc. There is a shot of the lunchroom area on page 8. That is the property we're looking at. Page number 9 gives you the site description. I wasn't sure originally what the $45,000 referred to. Now I see that it's in reference to an external shed building. I'm not in dispute with that, so I will adjust my value upwards by $45,000 to reflect that. You can see the site as shown on page number 9, and then on to page 10, the location of the property in the St. Boniface Industrial Park, just off of Dugald. So we can move forward into the valuation itself. Owner-occupied property. So there is no existing lease in place, obviously, to reference. We went to the market and looked at appropriate rental rates. Obviously, they're shown on page 13. They are all in very close proximity to the subject property. For the most part, they're all relatively recent. One's a bit older. Similar wall heights and similar sizes. Certainly the first 2 are excellent comparables. And you can see that our range is in that $5.50 up to a high end of $6.50. for one of the smaller leasable properties at 12,303. If you want to get the images of where these are located in reference to where the subject is, they are all within St. Boniface Industrial Park. You can see the photos of them, the top of the pages beginning on page 14 and the map on the bottom. So the one exception being 955 Lagimojay, which is just outside. So we are in agreement on rent. I'm just showing you the thoroughness of the presentation here. There's a reason we've chosen $6. It's because it's well supported by the market evidence. So $6 per square foot, given the subject that we're looking at. It's well constructed. It is in St. Boniface Industrial Park, which does tend to have lower demand than some other areas of the city overall. But looking at what the market is paying for properties of that size and quality in that specific area, $6 is appropriate. Moving on to vacancy. So subject is a single occupant building, and for valuation purposes, we're not looking at it as being owner occupied. It's what would this trade for on the market? So what rent would be applicable on the marketplace? What would a fair market vacancy be for that? What expenses and what cap rate? All of the normal parameters. So looking at vacancy, we've given you a full description here taken from the year-end 2017 Johnson report, which I believe we're all familiar with. And as you can see, overall industrial vacancy, the first row, year-end 2017, overall industrial vacancy is 3%, 5-year average 3%, above 2.5%. This includes owner-occupied buildings in the marketplace. That's the whole universe of industrial buildings that's surveyed in that number. Investment vacancy overall, 7.3% at year end, 7.3% 5-year average, considerably higher. Single tenant investment vacancy, 8.7%, 5-year average of 8%. Multi-tenant investment vacancy, 6.7% at year end, 5-year average of 7%. Obviously, considerably higher than what is being projected by the city at a low end of 2.5%. Now, is the property well constructed? Yes. Is it newer? Yes. Does it have 28-foot ceiling heights? No. Does it have a significant amount of loading? No, it doesn't. It doesn't have a lot of excess land. It's located in an area of lower demand in the St. Boniface Industrial Park. All of these things point to a higher vacancy allowance than 2.5%. We're not going to seek 7 or 8% as indicated by the market stats here, but certainly a 4% vacancy rate is well supported by the market evidence as supplied there today. As I'd mentioned, on the expense allowance side, we've heard extensively both from myself and other appellants on that subject. Our information is here for you to review. I'm not going to go through it in detail, as I trust you've all heard and considered it significantly already. I will point out that in the addenda materials, I've included a significant number of decisions from this board and perhaps even from this panel, I'm not sure, with reference to the re-inclusion of the 5% expense allowance in addition to the 2% expense allowance in these decisions from the 2020 cycle. So it's our expectation that the existing trend in decisions will continue forward, and you won't need to hear from me on that particular subject. Shortfall allowance, $3.75 a square foot. It is likely higher than that. We're not going to ask for any increase to that, but typically they do tend to run a bit higher than that. Now we can move on to my page number 21 and cap rate. So I will point out that we do have a single one in common with the city. If you look at number 2, the Debate Street sale in 2017, we have a cap rate of 7.4% rounded. The city has a cap rate of 7.44% not rounded. You can see that we're doing these on the same basis. So our capitalization rate chart here, again, is representative of investment grade properties sold in the Winnipeg marketplace at the reference date. They vary, obviously, in terms of size, investment quality, location. So there's not, it's difficult to have 7 apples that are all the same. We have a variety here, but it does enable the panel to frame what an appropriate cap rate would be. The cap rates that we were seeing in the near term prior to the valuation date of April 1, 2018, we're looking in that 6.6%, 7.2%, 7.4%, 2 single tenant transactions, 78 Hutchings, and 333 Debates, both being over 7% at 7.4 and 7.2%. The city previously valued this property in 2018 at 7%, having dropped it to 6%. We don't see moves of that significance in the marketplace overall. There's really no support for a cap rate at that rate. We have used a cap rate of 7% based on the evidence that we see before us. I'm happy to go into the details if you wish. And that is summarized at the bottom of page 21, our valuation in comparison to the city's supplemental valuation with 2018 for reference on the right-hand side. So our initial valuation of $4,028,000, we can add $45,000 to that for the external shed, which gives us, whose mental math is better than mine?
4,073.
Thank you. And the addendum materials simply include the income and expense as well as the material I already referenced. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Just a couple, thank you, Madam Chair. The picture on your front page, that's obviously a bit older. It's before the 2015 edition.
It is indeed. I was just trying to show more of the site overall. So you would see that back corner filled in and then an additional portion at the back if we were able to have a new one.
Your cap rate comparables, do you have the age of those buildings?
Yes, I do. The first one has 2 construction dates. First part in 61, second part in 1988. 333 Debates, 2 parts, 1980 and 2001. And Hutchings built in 1989. I didn't note down the remainder of them.
Okay, thank you. You included a bunch of previous agreements where they've added the 5% back in.
I did, and this is just a small sampling, essentially.
You would agree that there's lots of decisions where they have agreed with the 2%, including the subject property?
Yes, and I usually hesitate to go here, but I did note in my questioning that when I examined all of the contents of the decision and looking at who perhaps was there, it's not a surprise.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boreski, sorry.
The Johnson report vacancy information.
Yes.
Tell me how it compares with the city's information. Is it the same population of data? Is it different data? What is their source of data?
Yeah, so the Johnson report was originally known as the Croach report. A gentleman named Ken Croach saw a need to track commercial real estate stats, and he took this on as part of his brokerage practice. And so he began tracking industrial and office mainly, as well as sales and multifamily and things like that. But the stats that he tracked mainly were industrial and office. And he developed a system of industrial properties in the city, office properties, the main investment ones, as well as owner occupied, and he would keep track of those on a semi-annual basis. So twice a year, he would check in with the property owners, what had changed, had they leased any space, what did they leased it at, how much space was vacant, etc. It's pretty extensive, and when Wayne Johnson took it on, he took it up a notch from there, and he publishes this again semi-annually, and it goes out to all of the main investors in our market, as well as outside of our marketplace. So we're talking institutional players. They do rely on his data. As far as what the city has internally, well, I can't speak to how they determine their vacancy, unfortunately.
Do you have any idea whether we're talking about the same population of buildings?
Well,
the city and the Johnson report.
I would think that the Johnson report, having been vetted over time and relied upon by industry professionals, is pretty thorough. So if it doesn't sample each and every building that the city does, it's a very representative sample and wouldn't be significantly different than what is out there.
So it's not defined by the properties that company has under contract for other purposes.
No.
This is a survey that they do of everything that they can discern to be commercial or industrial.
That's correct. And Mr. Johnson he doesn't work for one of the main brokerages, so there's no protection from, say one brokerage not disclosing information to him. He works as a commercial realtor, but for one of the smaller firms, so everybody supplies him information because we all benefit from it.
Yeah. Is that your understanding as well? And what is your understanding of how the Johnson report data source compares with yours?
Super familiar with the Johnson report. I don't know the scope. I know the city gets between, we ask for income and expense information every year. We get between 65 and 75% returns every year. So we're seeing a wide sample, obviously 65 to 75% of all industrial properties return. A lot of them are owner occupied, which obviously you're not going to get much information off. But most of the big companies provide good information, and I'd say obviously the city has access to more information than most people.
So, but what you're both saying is that both sources rely upon quite an extensive population of data, yet they're coming up with radically different numbers.
I mean, if we look at the overall, it was 3% for Johnson report. I mean, without looking into this, and you don't have the excerpts from the Johnson report in your evidence?
No, I don't typically supply it. It's a very extensive document, so I supply a lot too much paper to begin with, so I don't tend to do that.
But the vacancy portion of that report, I believe, is only 5 or 6 pages. I've seen it in some other briefs, and it was provided. But without having the background information of that, it's hard to.
So I've been using it for roughly 18 years now, 20 years, anyway, somewhere there. And we we directly supply our information to Mr. Johnson. He calls religiously every 6 months to collect data from us and others. And we've, asked him specific questions about the extent of it, because we want to be sure when we rely upon it in our evaluation practice, particularly, that we're relying on quality evidence, essentially. So his tracking of the marketplace is very thorough. You would not find better evidence out there on vacancy. I think to speak to that, to have investment players such as Ontario Teachers Plan, all of the main investment portfolios across the country tend to subscribe to Mr. Johnson's report. So it's pretty very well vetted by this point.
Return to the assessor. Do you know what accounts for the change between 2018 and 2020, going from 4% down to the?
I don't even know that it was 4% in the previous cycle.
It was.
Was it? I guess that's in your evidence,
That's for
right?
the information here.
Yeah, it's the back page of yours.
Yeah, okay. I mean, we're just looking at what's occurring in the market. I mean, I'm looking at the Stevenson winter 2017 report, and they're showing a 3% industrial vacancy. And the first paragraph of the industrial section says, overall industrial vacancy remains at 3% in Q4 2016 and is expected to remain steady in 2017. So, and I'll answer to that specifically. So again, and that is accurate. You're looking at, again, the overall sphere of properties. And if you look at the top line of Mr. Johnson's report, if I flip to it here, I believe it states that your overall industrial vacancy is 3%, right? So we're valuing properties here on an income basis. We're not valuing the tenant or occupant that's in place. We have a single tenant building out there that would lease for X amount. What would a normalized vacancy for a single tenant building of that size in that location of that age be? The evidence is here for you. The overall industrial is always going to be low because it includes owner occupants. So if you're looking at owner occupants, obviously they're 100% occupied until such time as they go out of business and decide to sell or go bankrupt, etc. Right? So that drives your vacancy rate down. If you look at the market overall, the vacancy rate is higher than that. If you look at single tenant buildings, it's even higher. I didn't speak to that, and that was actually an error on my part, but single tenant buildings tend to have higher capitalization rates because of the additional risk of if you have a single tenant building and that tenant goes bankrupt and goes out of business, you have 100% vacancy until you refill that building. If you look at just to speak to that, my first rental comparable, 25 Paquin. It's a property that our company manages and leases. We had a single tenant building in there for years. They've just gone dark and shut that building down in advance of their lease expiring. So we have our firm has 100% vacancy in that property as it stands right now.
Well, and I think the question becomes, if this building was on the market, would it only be marketable as a single tenant building, or is it relatively easily demised into portions that would make it a multi-tenant and potentially attract more buyers at lower cap rates?
So two things. You're now changing what we're valuing. because we have a single tenant building. You're looking at an adjustment for the future, right? We're not valuing what the potential of the building is, we're valuing what it is today as of the valuation date, so it's single tenant. The building itself has an orientation such that I would suggest, given the available yard space and the build out, particularly the additional build out, it would be somewhat challenging to make it into a multi-tenant. It doesn't have the loading for that. It doesn't have necessarily the available yard space that tenants would need, etc. But more importantly, we're not valuing it as a multi-tenant. It is a single tenant occupant building.
Any question? Yes, please. I'm assuming it's a fairly successful single tenant occupied building, judging by the build, the continual build since 1994.
Yes, and I think I had briefly spoken to that. So the owner occupant is a successful business. They themselves are successful, but that's not ultimately what we're valuing here. That's the business, not the real estate, which are entirely separate. So we can't punish them for being successful and expanding their space requirements.
For their real estate.
Yes, it is larger, yes.
You indicated, I believe, I just want to make sure I've got this correct, that you wanted a cap rate of 7%,
That's correct.
both for 2020 and 2018.
Yes, I didn't change my cap rate between the 2018 and 2020 valuations.
And just to redirect to the assessor, I think you had indicated a cap rate of 6% for 2020 and 7% for 2018. Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I don't think I have any further questions. Is there any need for summation?
No, thanks.
Okay, thank you. And to move to 992 Dugald. You want to just read that one into the record? From what I understand, there's agreement here.
That's correct. Subjects located at 992 Dugald Road, roll number 0603215800. The department is willing to recommend a reduced assessment at $753,000.
753,000. And Mr. Smith, you're in agreement with that?
Yes, we are in agreement with that.
Are there any questions from the panel?
No
Nothing.
questions. Thank you.
All right, I believe we have come to the close.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.